All right, it is 2 p.m. and the recording is started. And also Greg says, let's go. So we better get started. So hello and welcome everyone. It is great to be back at MEC and we are so glad that you could join us today. I hope you're enjoying the airlift so far. Put a lot of work into it and there's much more to come tomorrow as well. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Scott Schnoll, and I'm the product marketing manager for Exchange Online and Exchange Server. And today, after a multi-year absence, I'm thrilled to bring back the Exchange Tips and Tricks session. I've got content that covers both Exchange Server and Exchange Online, so hopefully something for everyone. I also have several SMEs here to help out with any questions that might come up in the chat. Now, this session usually draws a wide range of attendees, some who are veterans with Exchange and others who are new to it. If you've seen a previous tips and tricks session, you know that I like to level set things by first going over the basics and the latest info, and then I'll cover some things that I think admins should be aware of. We only have 50 minutes today and a lot of content to cover, so we're going to get started right away. I will try to leave time for questions at the end, but if I don't get to yours, please do feel free to reach out to me directly with your question, and I'll do my best to answer. You can see my contact info on the slide. All right, so we'll kick off first with tips and tricks for Exchange Server, and then get into Exchange Online in a bit. So let's start with the basics for Exchange Server on premises. Now, the flow of customers that are actually moving from on-prem to the cloud does continue to be very strong. And of course, as you probably know, the cloud is where we are investing in building new experiences and using new technology. And it's also generally where the richest set of features are delivered. Now, while we do believe that the cloud delivers the best and most cost-effective experience for our customers, we very much understand that there are some customers who can't or don't want to move to the cloud, or don't want to put all their mailboxes in the cloud. That's why we build Exchange Server, and that's why we're focused on customer needs. The primary focus of Exchange Server is security, reliability, availability, and management. And these are the attributes that our on-premises customers tell us they need most from Exchange Server. Now, it's been more than 10 years since Exchange engineering went through a fundamental culture change with the recognition that we're not just building software for customers to deploy, but now we're building software that we would run on our own data centers and make available as a service to customers. Now, at the time, we were delivering live at EDU and BPOS, which would later become Exchange Online, Office 365, and ultimately part of Microsoft 365. And we weren't just building the software, we were directly involved in the operations of the service and in the support of customers. Now, prior to Exchange 2019, Exchange Server and Exchange Online shared the same code base, and that allowed us to ship code that ran at hyperscale in our data centers to customers for use in their own data centers. Now, in this single branch model, every change that was checked into the main branch line also existed in the on-premises builds. And as we forked the code for on-prem releases, that branch contained all the changes in the main line up until that point. We would then iterate on that branch, test and validate, and add any bug fixes as needed before we released. And then we'd keep that branch around just in case we needed to patch it for any reason. But the next CU would be based on the main line again, so it would contain all the changes made in the main line since we last forked. But the challenge was that many of the changes in the main line weren't applicable to on-prem releases, and sometimes they actually introduced bugs, which would only be discovered during validation of the on-prem branch. So we'd then have to fix the code in both the branch and in the main line to prevent it from impacting the next CU branch. Now, over time, what we found is the number of changes in the main line that directly benefited on-prem customers decreased. And so we spent more time looking for issues than we did adding features. So we decided to branch on-premises from the service as it gave us more control over what to ship to on-prem customers. We no longer take every change from Exchange Online and then spend time ensuring that the changes don't break Exchange Server. Instead, we simply choose what changes we want from the main Exchange Online branch and validate them as we port them over. And this allows us to pick and choose which features and bug fixes we ship to Exchange Server customers. So that means the changes we deliver in Exchange Server 2019 are deliberate and selected for on-prem deployments only. Now, a major benefit of this is that there's less change in the on-prem code, and that's good because, as I'm sure you know, anytime you change code, you risk introducing a new bug. So this means that Exchange Online and Exchange Server share the same rich heritage, but they have very distinct futures. The result is less change for Exchange Server customers, which means less chance of regressions and ultimately greater dependability and reliability. Now, when we did separate the code bases for Exchange Server and Exchange Online, we didn't remove any cloud code that was not needed on-prem. However, one of our recent initiatives is now to go in and try to get rid of any code that's not needed by Exchange Server. Now, given that we're talking about tens of millions of lines of code, this is going to take some time, but we are working on it. Our goal is to both clean up the Exchange Server code base and clean up the Exchange Server ecosystem. Now, our goal since the Exchange Server attacks last year has been to do all we can to help Exchange Server customers get current and stay current. So we first worked to get a clearer view of the Exchange Server landscape. Exchange is a 26-year-old product with 10 major releases. And as I know you know, there are a lot of different topologies out there. Now, we can see lots of Exchange servers around the world, and there are likely many more we can't for a variety of reasons, but mainly because they don't interact with any of our services. Now, when I say we can see servers, what I mean is that we have an internal view of Exchange servers that we've curated from a variety of interactions with a Microsoft Cloud service, such as data that customers approve to send to us, processing logs and mail flow in Exchange Online and Microsoft Online Services, and even some publicly available data sets like DNS records. Now, of the servers we can see, we can associate most of them with a Microsoft Cloud tenant, but a server has to interact with us for us to see it. We have no access to any customer systems. Now, we see more than 500,000 Exchange servers around the world. In other words, over a 2-week period, more than 500,000 Exchange servers in the world interact with us in some fashion. We see that Exchange 2013 and 2016 represent most of the install base, but we do see almost 100,000 servers running Exchange 2019. Unfortunately, we also see more than 50,000 servers still running Exchange 2010 and even a few thousand servers running Exchange 2007. And we also see that customers are struggling to stay up to date on both the latest CUs and SUs. More than 30% of the servers we can see are running in an unsupported state. Now, of the 2013 servers we see, fewer than 13% had the latest SU installed. For Exchange 2016, only about a third of the servers running on CU22 had the latest SU, and just under 50% of the servers running on CU23 had the latest SU installed. And for Exchange 2019, it's about 65% of the servers on CU11 had the latest SU, but fewer than 50% on the latest CU have the latest SU installed. Now, this is unacceptable. This represents a fundamental security risk to these customers and their data, so we want to do whatever we can to help them get current and stay current. Now, getting and staying current can, of course, mean migrating to the cloud, but for on-prem, it means that you must run the current CU for Exchange 2013 and 2016 because they're in extended support, and you must run the current or immediately previous CU for 2019 while it's in mainstream support. And getting current means you always have the latest SU installed as well. Now, it can also mean moving from an earlier version to Exchange 2019, which for most topologies is a new version. In fact, we recommend getting on 2019 now as it best positions you to move to Exchange Server V Next when it ships in 2025. Now, if you are on an earlier version of Exchange Server and you want to move to Exchange 2019, check out the session Upgrading to Exchange Server 2019, which happens tomorrow at 7 a.m. PST. Now, to further help customers get and stay current, we changed our servicing model for Exchange Server. We used to release quarter CUs in March, June, September, and December. Now, customers told us this was too frequent and that it sometimes actually hindered their ability to stay current, which for some customers, like Exchange Hybrid customers, is a requirement. And the customers also told us that December is not a good time to release a CU, and that's actually why we didn't release one in December 2021. Now, in April, we announced that we've moved to a release cadence of 2 CUs per year, releasing in H1 and H2 of each calendar year, with general target release dates of March and September. But our release dates are driven by quality, so we might release updates in April or maybe October or some other month, depending on what we're delivering. Now, a CU release every 6 months might, of course, be too long to wait for some updates, so we might release hotfixes between CU releases. And with these service model changes, being current still means running the latest CU when in extended support, or the one immediately preceding it when in mainstream support, but the currency window is now extended from 6 months to 1 year. So that's a nice big change. Now, to help customers stay current on SUs, we improved that experience too. Now, SUs are available for Microsoft Update, but many admins prefer to manually install them. And the number one known issue with manually installing SUs is that if the correct permissions aren't used, the server won't actually be updated and it can even end up in a bad state. So to address this, starting with our May SU earlier this year, our SUs now come in 2 different packages. One is the Windows installer patch that we have historically released, and the second one is a new self-extracting auto-elevating executable file. And the exe file is really just a wrapper for the Windows installer patch file, and it's designed to ensure that the installation runs with the required permissions. So now to install the update, you simply double-click the exe file and follow the instructions. The installation process will check permission prereqs, and if the check fails, it will try to elevate the permissions to the required admin level. And this makes installing SUs faster, easier, and much less error prone. Oh, and by the way, the exe package also supports command line parameters, so you can use it in unattended installations as well. And for more details, check out the blog post linked on the slide. Okay, let's talk about Exchange Server support. All currently supported Exchange Server products fall under our fixed lifecycle policy, which has 3 phases: mainstream support, extended support, and beyond end of support. Now, Exchange 2019 is in mainstream support, so all types of support are available, including DCRs and feature additions. Exchange 2013 and 2016 are in extended support, so they're only going to get security updates and any applicable time zone updates. Now, the table on the slide also shows beyond end of support options, including the extended security update, or what we call the ESU program. However, that won't be an option for Exchange 2013. Exchange 2013 customers should start moving off that version now. There won't be an ESU option for 2013. Now, as we announced in our Exchange Server roadmap update back in June, when we ship the next version of Exchange Server, we're moving to the modern lifecycle policy. We're transitioning Exchange Server to a new servicing and support model that moves away from support deadlines and major releases every 3 years into a modern lifecycle that provides continuous product updates with no end of support dates. And we're doing this to better support our customers by making it easier to run Exchange on-prem. Instead of major upgrades with mailbox moves every few years, we're providing a smoother way to stay up to date with the latest bug fixes and any new features we add with minimal disruption to the environment. Now, in terms of what's ahead for updates, currently, we hope to release the next CU for Exchange Server 2019 around the first week of November or so. But the biggest change coming up after that is the retirement of Exchange 2013, which reaches end of support on April 11th, 2023. That's just a little more than 200 days from now. So as I said, if you're on Exchange 2013 today, it's time to move to the cloud and or a newer version of Exchange Server. Now, regardless of what version of Exchange Server you run, we strongly recommend that you keep your servers updated with the latest updates. In fact, you're required to do so when you're running in a hybrid config or when the version of Exchange Server you're running is in extended support. And that actually applies to all 2016 and 2013 servers. Now, updating your server is pretty straightforward. You can start by using the Exchange Server Health Checker script to inventory your servers. Running the script is going to tell you if any of the servers are behind on updates in terms of both CUs and SUs. It actually performs more than 30 checks. It's largely looking for common configuration issues that are known to cause problems. It also helps collect useful information, and it will also speed up the process of information gathering about your server inventory. Now, once you know what updates are needed, you can use the Exchange Update Step-by-Step Guide, what we sometimes call the Update Wizard, to choose your currently running CU and your target CU, and you'll get directions for your environment. I'll show you what that looks like in a moment. Now, if you do encounter any errors during the installation of an update, the Setup Assist script can also help you troubleshoot them. And if something doesn't work properly after updates, we have an update troubleshooting guide, which also covers the most common issues and how to resolve them. Now, there are some additional best practices that aren't listed on the slide. Where possible, you always want to check and test your updates in a non-production environment before putting them in production. It's great to always have a working backup of both Active Directory and the Exchange server being updated. You'll also want to back up all of your customizations because many of them will not survive a CU install. I'll have a little bit more to say about that in a bit. And you want to reboot the server before you install the update and then reboot the server again after the install has completed. And then during the update process, we do also strongly recommend that you temporarily disable any antivirus software that might be running as well. Now, the Exchange Updates Step-by-Step Guide, or the Exchange Update Wizard, it's a very quick and easy tool to help you get current. You simply navigate to assistance.microsoft.com. You can choose Exchange Deployment. You can choose Update Exchange. And then open Update Exchange to start the wizard. Now, in the wizard, you can start by choosing the version of Exchange that you're running, and then you choose your current CU and the CU that you want to install. And then when you click Next, you get your deployment instructions and simply follow these instructions to get and to stay current. And of course, be sure to review all of the known issues and the FAQs as well. This is super important. Now, depending on the scenario, some updates might require additional actions to be performed by the Exchange admin. And to make sure that you performed all the actions after installing an SU, you can run the Exchange Server Health Checker script. So for example, the August SU requires an admin to manually enable the Windows Extended Protection feature. Effectively, what extended protection allows within Windows authentication is a binding to occur between the auth info passed at the application layer and the transport layer security encapsulating the lower levels of the protocol stack. The auth information is also supplemented by adding namespaces to the client, the one that's accessing the connection. And if a man in the middle doesn't represent the namespace the server is expecting, or if they're tampering with the TLS information between the client and the server, this makes the binding invalid, and the authentication request will now fail. So this effectively makes both NTLM relay and ticket replay scenarios much more difficult for bad actors. Now, Windows Extended Protection is supported on Exchange 2013, 2016, and 2019, starting with the August SU. And while you can go and manually enable extended protection on each virtual directory, we did release a script that can help you accomplish this in bulk. Now, you must ensure all of your servers are on the required CU and have the August SU installed before you use the script to enable extended protection. And very soon, possibly this week, we will release an update to the script that resolves some issues around archiving, along with some fixes for bugs reported to us by customers. And we'll post something on the Exchange team blog when the updated script is available. There are some caveats, though. Extended protection can't currently be enabled on any 2013 servers that host public folders in a coexistence environment, or on any servers running Exchange 2016 CU22 or older, or Exchange 2019 CU11 or older that also host a public folder hierarchy. And it also doesn't work with hybrid servers using modern hybrid config or in SSL offloading scenarios. And as always check and test any third-party products in your lab before you enable extended protection inside a production environment. Okay, customers who are running earlier versions of Exchange should also check out the preferred architecture for Exchange 2019. Now, the preferred architecture, or PA as we call it, this represents our recommended deployment architecture, and it's very similar to how we deploy Exchange Online. Now, with each new release of Exchange Server, we update the PA, and we also discuss the changes that customers need to be aware of. So Exchange 2013 brought us the first PA, which was later followed by a refresh for Exchange 2016 that included refinements that were unique to 2016. The PA for 2019 has also been updated to account for changes in 2019. And while 2019 offers a variety of architectural choices for an on-prem deployment, it's really the architecture in the PA is the only one we recommend as it's the most scrutinized one. Now, following the PA also helps customers become a member of a community of organizations that have similar Exchange Server deployments. And it also makes it easier for knowledge sharing and for more rapid response to unforeseen circumstances. And in fact, Microsoft support is aware of what an Exchange Server PA deployment should look like. And this helps them prevent spending a lot of time learning about or understanding a custom environment before they can start working towards a support case resolution. Now, the PA itself is based on commodity servers, and that includes things like dual socket servers with up to 48 cores, which is twice as many cores as what we supported in 2016. We also now, with 2019, support up to 256 gigs of memory. This is over an increase of 192 gigs in 2016. And one big change is the ability to mix traditional rotating platter storage with solid state storage in the same chassis. But even though we've increased the processor and memory capacity in 2019, our recommendation will still be to scale out rather than scale up. In other words, deploy a larger number of servers with slightly fewer resources per server instead of a smaller number of servers using maximum resources and hosting a very large number of mailboxes. This will help you lessen the impact of planned and unplanned outages, and it will also reduce the risk of other system bottlenecks. And also bear in mind that an increase in system resources doesn't mean you'll see linear performance gains in 2019 when compared to 2016. 2019 is substantially different from 2016, which makes it very difficult to directly compare. So simply follow our sizing guidance when determining your server design. Now, new to the Exchange 2019 PA is this recommendation of having two classes of storage for everything not located on the RAID 1 disk pair that's described in the PA. Now, in addition to SATA drives, SSDs are now part of the PA due to the Metacache database feature in Exchange 2019. One other important call out is that in the PA, all servers are physical servers that use locally attached storage. We recommend physical hardware rather than virtualized hardware for a couple reasons. First, the servers are scaled in the PA to use about 80% of the resources during the worst case failure mode. But second, virtualization itself comes with a slight performance penalty, but it also adds an additional layer of management and complexity so that they can introduce additional recovery modes that really don't add any value for Exchange. Exchange natively provides this same functionality. Now, if you do provision Exchange on virtual machines, you have to ensure that the hypervisor being used for it is supported by Microsoft and that the infrastructure to be used by Exchange meets the performance requirements that were determined during the sizing process with the Exchange Server Calculator. So, for example, in the case of deployment on Azure virtual machines, that's supported if all storage volumes used for databases and transaction logs are configured for Azure Premium Storage. Now, speaking of the Exchange Server Calculator, I'd like to announce a couple of changes related to it. First, we're updating the calculator by fixing some bugs. So we fixed an issue in how we were assigning users to databases and how we calculate the number of databases per server. In some cases, this bug actually resulted in an output showing 10 times the number of users. So for example, sizing for 8,000 users, but getting an output for 80,000 users. We also fixed a bug where the calculator was returning unexpected results and an incorrect disk to database mapping. And then finally, we also fixed an issue that was causing some divide by zero issues. Now, you may be aware that we currently ship the calculator with Exchange Server, but we've actually decided to pull it from the build and leave it as a standalone download on the Download Center. So the next CU for 2019 won't include the calculator anymore. We want a single source of truth, and that's what this download page and URL will give you. Now, the release of the updated calculator is imminent, and once we release it, you'll be able to download it using the URL on the slide. And again, as I said, that will always take you to the latest version. We'll also publish a blog post with the details of the changes when we release the updated calculator as well. Now let's talk about this screen in setup. We've had a feature in setup for a while that gives the admin an option to check for updates. It's actually the default setting, as you see here, and it's an option that we recommend using in our installation documentation and all our guides. But there is some confusion about what this option does, and I think it might be based on the language we use to describe it. I am going to see if I can get the screen in our documentation updated to clarify what this does. This option searches for updates to the version of Exchange that you're currently installing. It does not detect newer CUs. So if you were installing, let's say, Exchange 2019 CU6, and we release an update to CU6, then Setup can detect that, download it, and use the updated version of CU6 instead of the version of CU6 you used to launch Setup. What it doesn't do is it doesn't tell you that CU7 or later is available, nor will it download later CUs or any SUs. So basically, this feature is only for when we re-release a CU. Now, having said that, we're actually going to look into the possibility of enhancing this feature to see if we can get it to check for later CUs and SUs and possibly download and install those. But for now, we will try to clean up the language so that people understand how the feature works now. And then later on, we'll see what we can do to make updates even better within the product. Now, speaking of updates, I'm not sure how many of you are using System Center Operations Manager, aka SCOM, but the SCOM management team recently released an update to the Exchange Server Management Pack that, among other things, provides version agnostic strings, which means the management pack can now support all versions of Exchange Server. And this is actually the first significant management pack update for Exchange since we added Exchange 2016 back in 2016. And in addition to supporting 2019, the new management pack does also include some new rules and monitors for both Edge and Hub Transport performance queues. You can download the updated management pack and the documentation using the top URL on the slide, Exchange MP. And you can also provide feedback directly to the SCOM team using the second URL, SCOM FB. Now, one thing to look out for if you do use SCOM and the Exchange Server Management Pack is that enabling extended protection as part of our most recent security update will cause SCOM to start alerting on all the deliberately closed communication paths. Basically, it's generating a lot of alerts, with most of them referring to blocked RPC or other types of communications. For now, you can go ahead and filter out that noise, but we are looking into ways in which we can try to suppress these events. Back in April, we announced the addition of Exchange Server, SharePoint Server, and Skype for Business Server to the Applications and On-Premises Servers Bounty Program. Now, our bug bounty programs are just one of the many ways we invest in partnerships with the global security research community to help secure Microsoft customers. Through this newly expanded program, we encourage researchers to discover and report high-impact security vulnerabilities to help protect our customers. And we offer awards of up to $26,000 for eligible submissions. The bounty also includes high-impact scenarios, which offer the highest awards to research areas with the highest potential impact to customer security. Now, since we added the office servers to the bounty program, we've received around 60 reports from 40 researchers, which have resulted in 8 cases in scope for bounty awards for Exchange, SharePoint, and Skype. And across all office servers, we've paid about $127,000 in bounty awards already. So we're very thrilled at the success of that program. Now, with the H1 2022 CU, we did add support for running Exchange 2019 on Windows Server 2022 and in environments that use Windows Server 2022 Active Directory servers. Now, we won't be adding support for running earlier versions of Exchange on Windows Server 2022, but we did just complete testing of Exchange 2013 and Exchange 2016 with Windows Server 2022 Active Directory servers. And today, I'm thrilled to announce that we now support running Exchange 2013 and 2016 in environments that have Windows 2022 directory servers. So support for Exchange Server and Windows Server 2022 is detailed on the table on the slide, and the Exchange Server supportability matrix has already been updated to reflect these changes. One call out though, by default, Windows Server 2022 does use TLS 1.3. Support for TLS 1.3 is slated to be added to Exchange 2019 next year, likely in the H2 CU. Okay, let's talk about the TAP quickly. Customers and partners are all invited to join the technology adoption program for Exchange 2019. If you think your organization is what we're looking for, you can actually nominate yourself by sending an email to exchangetap@microsoft.com. Put TAP customer nomination in the subject line and include your legal company name, the number of mailboxes in your organization, the versions of Exchange you're currently running, including Exchange Online if you're hybrid, and the name, email address, and phone number for the primary contact person and the primary reason for your interest in the TAP. Now, there's many benefits to being a member of the TAP, including directly working with and providing feedback to the Exchange engineering team and early access to pre-release builds for testing and validation, which, of course, means early access to new and enhanced features. If you are accepted into the TAP, we do need you to sign an NDA and go through a few quick steps to enable communication within your organization. We do also require you to deploy pre-release builds of Exchange in your production environment, but only on some servers, not all of them. We do require you to provide us feedback, complete surveys, and basically commit the necessary resources for TAP activities. But do note that not all nominations are accepted. They are reviewed and screened, but not everyone is accepted. And no one's allowed access to anything until all the proper paperwork is executed. But if you are preliminarily accepted, we will contact you and get that paperwork started. Here's a great example of how the TAP helps Exchange Server customers. Now, for years, we've been saying how running antivirus software on your Exchange servers can enhance the security and health of your Exchange organization. We've also said that if you're deploying file-level scanners on your Exchange servers, make sure that the appropriate exclusions, such as directory exclusions, process exclusions, and file name exclusions, are in place for both scheduled and real-time scanning. But times have changed, including the cybersecurity landscape. So we've done some testing, both internally and via the Exchange TAP, and we found that the existing exclusions for IIS, namely the INET serve directory and the INET info and W3WP processes, are no longer needed, and that it would actually be better to scan these files and the directory than to not scan them. So now we recommend that you remove these exclusions from your file level scanner. Now, one note about the guidance, though, we only tested these changes on Exchange 2019, and that's what we also asked the TAP to focus on. We believe, however, that these exclusions can be safely removed from servers running 2016 and 2013. So When running on either of those versions, after removing these exclusions, keep an eye on the server and watch for issues. If any problems do arise, simply put the exclusions back in place. And if you don't mind, report the issue to us and let us know. Now, the latest guidance is at aka.ms/exchangeav, and we're going to be updating it to reflect this change. Okay, let's talk about some things that we're currently working on. First is modern auth. So today, Exchange Server uses basic auth, an outdated industry standard that malicious cyber actors now use to their advantage. In fact, that's one of the reasons we're working to turn it off in Exchange Online, in case you haven't heard. For Exchange Server customers that are purely on-prem, though, there's no off-the-shelf solution to use modern auth. So we're adding modern auth support to Outlook for authentication against Exchange 2019 using an on-prem STS and the ability to switch modern auth on and off at the user level. And this is going to provide the use of stronger authentication features like MFA, smart cards, and cert-based auth, and support for various Outlook clients on Windows, Mac, Android, and iOS is coming, but they will be released in a staggered way. We expect to add modern auth support to Outlook on Windows this fall, perhaps, but we won't have support for Outlook on Mac until next year. And again, those dates could change. It's possible not anything shows up until next year. I don't yet have dates for Outlook Mobile because Outlook Mobile uses Cloud Cache, which we can't use in pure on-prem environments. Now, this is priority work, and it's particularly important for hosters where their biggest pain point is not being able to enable MFA for Outlook desktop and mobile clients. So we are working on this as quickly as we can. And as I said, to help customers gradually roll this out, we're going to enhance authentication policies so that you can enable and disable this at the user level. And just so there's no confusion, this is not the same as hybrid modern auth, where customers use DirSync to sync identities to Azure AD and create an OAuth trust between Exchange Server and Exchange Online. And to help customers stay current on CUs, we're going to try to improve the update experience. Now, one of the known issues that I mentioned earlier with CUs is that setup overrides files like the web.config and shared web.config. And these files contain customizations, for example, client-specific message size limits. And after the CU is installed, the admin has to reapply these changes. So as a result, admins often back up and restore their custom settings after installing a CU. So to address this, we're going to be making changes so setup will preserve these customizations, and we expect to release those changes in a CU release later on. And once implemented, setup is going to automatically create a backup of these files and then restore them to the state they were in before the upgrade process was kicked off. And we have a lot of hybrid tenants that combined have more than 110 million mailboxes on premises. And we have thousands and thousands of modern hybrid customers, some of which are very large. Now, hybrid does sometimes generate a fair amount of support cases, so we are always looking at ways to improve the experience. Now, one of the major pain points in hybrid is the breaking of custom configurations. Today, the Hybrid Configuration Wizard, or HCW, performs several tasks, and after the wizard's done, admin often customize the environment. But during any subsequent run of the wizard, most of the first-time config tasks aren't needed, but since you can't skip steps, you have to redo all of them, and any customizations made after the first run are lost, which can lead to a bad hybrid state. So to address this, we're modifying the HCW to allow admins to choose which steps to perform and which steps to skip. We call this HCW a la carte. Now, another top issue for customers is that really the HCW is not transparent. Admins can only figure out what changes were made using the generated log files after the changes have already been made. There's no way to predict the changes in the environment or to prevent them from happening. So to address this, we're adding a what if feature that's designed to provide details of the changes that would be made by the HCW if it were run. And we hope to release the updated HCW early next year. The team that is delivering these features has several sessions at MEC. including the Exchange Server and Hybrid feature review tomorrow at 8 a.m. PST. A roundtable discussion for Exchange Server and Hybrid tomorrow at 9 a.m. PST, and an Ask the Experts at 10 a.m. PST. So I encourage all of you to attend and chat with them about those upcoming features. Okay, that's the server portion. Let's talk about Exchange Online. Again, starting with the basics. Now, Exchange is one of our longest standing products, as I said, starting more than 26 years ago when Exchange Server 4.0 released in March 1996. Over the years, we became the industry leader in enterprise email, innovating in mobile and web-based mail, and in calendaring and scheduling, e-discovery and compliance. And when the cloud took off, we built hybrid solutions that spanned on-prem and the cloud seamlessly. And we've spent years leading the push for larger mailboxes, lower cost storage, and maximizing the capabilities of commodity servers and storage, all so that we could reduce your cost. And Exchange Online is really the pinnacle year of this now nearly 30 years of innovation. With Exchange Online, you get the features from previous versions of Exchange, plus so much more, plus security, plus lower costs, plus increased productivity, all with a financially backed uptime SLA of 99.9%. And Exchange Online is a hyperscale service, but believe it or not, it actually started as a single server that sat under an engineer's desk in Building 43 on the Redmond campus. And since then, it's grown into a vast global service with more than 300,000 physical servers. Now, as we mentioned in the last slide, we have a 99.9% financially backed uptime guarantee. But as you can see from this slide, and I realize the numbers are very tiny, we have consistently exceeded that SLA, which means your data is going to be available to you when you need it. And by the way, 99.9% uptime translates to about 8.77 hours, but we actually often exceed that, and we're generally at around 5 nines, which is essentially 52 minutes a year in downtime. Now, a core design goal is to get customers onto our network as quickly as possible, as we have the resources to be able to create a massive network, which is inevitably more secure and faster than customer networks, since we can take advantage of economies of scale. And for lots of great info on Exchange Online and networking, check out the session An Insider's View of Exchange Online Connectivity tomorrow at noon PST. Okay, let's first talk about some recent developments in Exchange Online, and then we'll get into what's coming next for Exchange Online. So to create a consistent experience for our customers to manage compliance across all applications, we migrated 3 features from the legacy admin center, including retention tags, retention policies, and journal rules. And these all now exist in the Microsoft Purview Compliance Center. They're available in a new drop-down menu under Data Lifecycle Management and Exchange Legacy. Now, the classic EAC is being deprecated starting this month, and soon you won't be able to access these features through the classic EAC, so start using the Compliance Center today if you're still using these features. Now, having said that, these are legacy features, and as our data lifecycle management and records management offerings have evolved into the future of data governance in Microsoft 365, we actually don't recommend the use of them, except when you're moving items from a primary mailbox into an archive mailbox, or maybe in the case of MRM tags applied by an admin to default folders within a mailbox. And that's why you see these yellow warning messages if you visit these pages. Instead, we recommend using retention policies and retention labels, which are available in the Purview Compliance Center. Now, similarly, we also don't recommend the use of journal rules to send email externally due to compliance regulations. Instead, we also suggest using Microsoft Purview to achieve that goal as well. Previously, the tenant allow and block list or table is used to prevent users from receiving email from select senders. However, currently users can still send emails to that same address or email domain. Now, we recently made a change in this regard. With this change, the table will be extended to prevent users from sending emails to addresses and domains that are added to the allow block list. This change applies to existing sender blocks and any new sender blocks that are added. Now, as you can see in the screenshot, we changed sender to say domains and addresses because it's no longer just block senders. Do note that there are some limits with the table. So for domains and email addresses, the maximum number of allowed entries is 500. The maximum number of block entries is 500. So you get 1,000 domain and email address entries in total. For spoof senders, the maximum number is 1,024 entries. And do note that while all entries should generally be active within about 30 minutes, it can take about 24 hours in some cases for the change to take effect. DLP. Now, DLP policies are used to identify, monitor, and protect sensitive information across Microsoft 365. People in your organization, they need to work with sensitive information and stay compliant with your policies, but you also don't want to block them from getting their work done. And this is where email notifications and policy tips can help. When you create a DLP policy, you can enable user notifications as shown here. And when you do, Microsoft 365 sends email notifications and displays policy tips. But capabilities we recently launched enable you to configure email notifications and policy tips independently now. So as you can see, you can customize who gets notification emails, as well as the email text and the text for policy tips. Also want you to be aware that we've added 42 new sensitive information types to public preview that also help you identify, classify, and protect credentials that are found with documents across your landscape. We actually refer to these as credential sensitive information types, or credential SITs. These new SITs are available in Content Explorer and Activity Explorer, and they enable admins to locate documents that contain sensitive credentials and to identify activity involving the use of those credentials within the environment. Okay, let's talk a little bit about what's on the way for Exchange Online. Up first is the Exchange Online PowerShell v3 module. For a while now, we've been working on a new version of Exchange Online PowerShell to provide a more secure experience for management. So we built a preview that enables admins to use Windows PowerShell for day-to-day management of Exchange Online without the need to enable WinRM Basic Auth. Now, the preview uses modern auth and works with MFA for connecting to all Exchange-related PowerShell environments in Microsoft 365. So, namely, Exchange Online PowerShell, Security and Compliance PowerShell, and the standalone Exchange Online Protection PowerShell. Now, the preview is currently labeled as 2.0.x. However, on September 20th, we are going to GA the module and we'll rebrand it to v3 when we do that. But unlike the preview, the GA version will only support the Exchange Online commandlets. v3 of the module contains the REST equivalents of all the RPS commandlets, and they also have the exact same signature as the RPS versions, so your scripts won't need to be changed. But the commandlets for the Security and Compliance PowerShell and the standalone EOP PowerShell will still use their remote PowerShell versions. The REST equivalent of those commandlets are going to be made available in the v3 module coming up in a later release. By the way, you can use this QR code to provide feedback on your Exchange admin experiences directly to the team responsible for Exchange Online PowerShell and Exchange Admin Center. If you've used Activity Explorer in the Purview Compliance Center, you know that it provides a historical view of activities on labeled content, including content in Exchange Online. But in the Compliance Center, there's an export limit of 10,000 rows. So we're in the process of rolling out the export activity Explorer data commandlet, which will allow you to export all rows of data for up to 30 days of historical activity. And this is rolling out in public preview. It was actually expected to be completed by mid-August, but it's still underway, and this should be completed any day now. In fact, the commandlet details and syntax are finalized, but the documentation hasn't been updated to reflect that. That'll happen shortly. But basically, the only things missing is the output format parameter, which can be either CSV or JSON. We also recently enabled capabilities that allow admin to block suspicious entities when submitting emails, URLs, or attachments from Microsoft when you're directly submitting them through the submissions panel. We've started rolling this out, and it should be available for everyone in worldwide, if not already. And it will be coming to our Gov clouds, but I don't have any ETA on it. Now, the way it works is that in the Defender portal, you can now block the sender or domain or a URL or attachment while you're submitting suspicious emails, URLs, or attachments from the flyout panel. So this means you don't have to switch back to the table page to block a suspicious entity. Anything that you enter in here will automatically show up on your block list. Now, after you publish sensitivity labels, they do appear in Office apps for users to classify and protect the data that they're creating or editing. So what we're doing is we're adding the ability to apply S/MIME protection to emails within Outlook apps for Win32, Mac, iOS, Android, and web. But you can't do this using the Compliance Center. You have to use either Set Label or New Label in the Security and Compliance Center PowerShell. This rollout, for those of you familiar with it, was originally scheduled to be complete in August, but it'll be mid-October before it's complete. And of course, note that this is only for when you have a working S/MIME deployment and you want a label to automatically apply S/MIME protection on emails rather than the default protection, which will use rights management encryption from Azure. Now, as we mentioned earlier, we see a lot of Exchange servers that are unsupported, end of life, or out of date. And as I said, our goal is to help customers get and stay current. As was mentioned in the keynote and discussed in the Exchange Server Update Dashboard session this morning, we are going to introduce a new experience in the Microsoft 365 Admin Center for viewing the CU and SU status of on-premises Exchange servers in a hybrid environment. And this dashboard provides a view of on-prem servers in a hybrid environment that show admins which servers need CUs, which ones need SUs, and which ones are near or at the end of life. And some of the data I mentioned earlier that we used in our curated view are used to deliver this experience. We're in private preview now and hoping to move to public preview before the end of the year, but it depends on how the private preview goes. Private preview is currently closed, but we might be expanding it. So keep an eye on the Exchange Team blog for more details. Now, I don't have an ETA for public preview or GA, but when we do move to public preview, you'll be able to try this out in your tenant. I will also say that a similar experience will be added to Exchange 2019 next year, which might also include admin notification capabilities. And the Exchange server experience might be called the Security Control Center, and that's tentatively scheduled for the H1 2023 CU. Okay, I do see that we're at time, but if you'll bear with me for a couple minutes, let's just talk about a couple things that are going away from Exchange Online, starting with the old Exchange Online PowerShell in the legacy, or what we call the classic EAC. There's this option to download it, but we're retiring this option on December 31st. And in fact, support for this module ended last month. So we strongly recommend using the Exchange Online PowerShell v2 module or the v3 module once it GAs. Speaking of the classic EAC, which you can see here, you might also be aware that we've announced our intent to deprecate it. We want you to start using the new EAC if you haven't already. There's a ton of new value in there. And it's already become the default home for many Exchange admins. Now, one thing I'll point out, those of you who are already using the new EAC might have noticed that we removed the toggle that enables you to choose which EAC is your default portal. We still give you the option to go to the classic EAC, but once you start using the new one, your ability to change the default portal will be gone, and the new EAC will become your default. And of course, once the classic one is deprecated, which we expect to complete in January next year, all admins will then have to use the new EAC. Now, to centralize the customer experience for managing Exchange archive mailboxes, we are also removing the Archive tab from the Microsoft 365 page under Data Lifecycle Management in the Purview Compliance portal. That's expected to disappear by next month. And this tab basically enables you to export the details on this page. You can see here. You can also enable and disable an archive mailbox for a user. And you can also see sizing and usage information on a per user basis for a mailbox and its recoverable items, and for an archive mailbox and its recoverable items. However, the EAC only shows you mailbox sizes. And here's the archive mailbox size. If you want to get the recoverable items size, you can use get mailbox folder statistics for a mailbox, and you can use get mailbox for the archive. Now, in safe attachment policies, one of the actions that can be applied to messages that are found to contain malware is called replace. And what this does is it delivers the message body without attachments. And in place of the attachment is a text file that simply says the attachments were removed due to malware detection. Now we're retiring the replace action. The first phase is going to apply the block action behavior to any existing policies that currently use the replace action. This is going to happen automatically. The second phase is going to remove the replace action from the Defender portal and the related commandlets. And as part of this change, any existing policies that use the replace action will be changed to use the block action instead. We're going to start rolling out this change later this month, with worldwide deployment completed by next month. And for GovClouds, we're going to start mid-November, and we expect to be complete mid-December. If you do choose monitor, block, or replace, the option to redirect messages with detected attachments to a specific email address is available, but we're making it a behavior change here too. Specifically, this redirect option will soon only be available for monitor. So as I said, replace is going away. So the redirect option is really just being removed from block. And this change is going to start rolling out in the worldwide cloud later this month, and it will be completed by late October. And again, GovCloud will start mid-November and hopefully complete by mid-October. We're also deprecating client access rules with new features like continuous access evaluation that allow Azure AD applications to subscribe to critical events that can then be evaluated and enforced in near real time. You get a lot better control using CAE over CARs. So we are announcing the retirement of CARs in Exchange Online to be fully deprecated by September next year. We're going to send message center posts to tenants using client access rules to start the planning process to migrate. Note that if you don't currently use CARs, it's going to be disabled for your tenant after next month. But if you currently have CARs configured in your tenant, you'll be able to keep using them until September 2023, which provides you more than enough time to migrate to continuous access evaluation. Okay, I'm not going to talk about the basic auth in Exchange Online because we've already had a couple sessions on it. And again, I know we're out of time, but there was a whole wizard here. So I'm going to go ahead and end it there. I want to thank my SMEs for handling a lot of the questions that came up in the chat. Again, I know we ran over, but for those of you who have a question that didn't get answered yet, I very much welcome you to reach out to me directly and ask that question. And with that, I want to remind everyone to please fill out your survey. Thank you, Laura, for posting the link. And I hope you got something useful out of this session, and I hope you enjoy the rest of MEC. Thanks very much.